Hello everyone and welcome to this presentation. I would like to share with you some principal considerations on the topic beyond holy wars through interreligious dialogue. Who would ever have thought that so-called holy wars will be fought in post-Enlightenment times still? Some of these throw the entire world in disarray, like the Al-Qaeda attacks on the US September 11, 2001. Others are more regionally confined, as the Boko Haram atrocities in Nigeria and the current clashes between Hindus and Muslims in India, notably in Kashmir. To be sure, every one of these conflicts has multiple causes to it: ethnic, economic, political, social, cultural, religious. However, it is the religious aspect which stands out, since the aggressors argue their cause by drawing on religious principles. Quote, "Those who say religion has nothing to do with politics do not know what religion means." End of quote. This statement by Mahatma Gandhi highlights the blind spot of Enlightenment thinking about religion. Accepted as indisputable fact, many are convinced that religion is nothing but a purely private matter expressing personal beliefs, how irrational whatsoever. Politics, in contrast, is looked at as the arena of public discourse by rational human beings for the common good, freed from fetters of ultimate authority, except the social contract agreed upon by the people. However, so-called holy wars teach us otherwise, calling for some reflection upon the interplay of religions and politics. Religion and politics are intertwined, inseparably. That is why there is a real problem. Religion is not merely a set of distinctive beliefs and private convictions to satisfy emotional yearnings, intellectual curiosity, or beloved tradition. Of course, religion must be appropriated by individual believers personally to become meaningful. But religion has, as ever, a bearing upon public life by structuring the rhythm of time, shaping the dress code, and regulating diet. Religion also accounts for specific convictions about the human being and community life, about how to deal with procreation and maturation, dying and death, and of how best to handle conflicts. In short, religion molds society and vice versa. Such reciprocal affirming of basic tenets and practices shapes civilizations and accounts for the interwovenness of religion and politics. Based on an analysis of the global scenario at the closing of the 20th century, political scientist Samuel Huntington predicted a clash of civilizations. Contrary to prevailing optimism that growing political, technical, and economic globalization would bring about one universal culture, Huntington expected the future to be decisively determined by a violent clash of cultures, motivated by ethnicity and religion, due to the escalation of vehement competition between major civilizations. Not only did the 9/11 incidents prove him right, the treatment of Tibetan Buddhist and Muslim Uyghurs by China, or the assaults by Buddhist Myanmar forces on Muslim Rohingyas sadly do so too, though not declared as holy wars. Since religion affects the personal and communal way of life, religion is willy-nilly political and, hence, becomes also a cause for serious conflict. However, politics is not at the core of religion. Rather, those who declare holy wars only skillfully manipulate something genuinely religious to serve their interest. But what is religion? Not discussing the etymology of the term contested since Roman times, nor critiquing the various abstract definitions proposed since the age of European Enlightenment, religion here is taken as empirical religion. To focus on empirical religion means to look at how religion is actually lived, for it is the diverse ways of responding to the tasks of day-to-day life where conflicts arise. While differences in religious teaching and paraphernalia are taken for granted concerning, for instance, authoritative scriptures, offices and places of worship, temple, synagogue, mosque or church, It is diversity in the handling of ordinary life, where estrangement, friction and tension occur. What to eat and what to abstain from, how to hallow time, how to dress and behave appropriately, how to manage the personal, the social and public life. Yet, despite their broad diversity and variety, all religions are marked by something in common. Their adherents hold that what they revere and worship is definite and ultimately binding. Religious people are committed wholeheartedly to what to them has proven itself as valid beyond doubt and what they therefore regard as ultimate, pledging their lives with unrestrained dedication to it. It doesn't matter that the truly ultimate is perceived variously in different religious traditions and over an extended period of time, be it in personal terms, deities or God, or as a non-personal concept, idea, ideology, practice, or as non-existent at all, even as irrelevant. Perception does not matter here. What matters is the lived relationship to that what people revere as ultimate, because this impacts their way of life and their personal lifestyle, irrespective if they are conscious of it or not. Religion, thus, can be defined as a lived relationship towards an ultimate. It is a total dedication of people who have relinquished any doubt concerning the ultimate, which those striving for power seek to tap into. By declaring their cause as holy to fight blasphemy, tacticians not only can rest assured of loyalty from those who hold their religious tradition dear, proclaiming the call to arms as holy also warrants unquestioning commitment and ultimate sacrifice. Thus, the very strength of a genuinely religious life, the unquestioning total commitment, unfortunately makes religion prone to abuse and exploitation by vested interests, political and otherwise. It also explains why so-called holy wars have been fought with utter determination and cruelty from within every culture. Resolute determination closes the mind and effectively inhibits criticism. This is precisely what those who declare holy wars intend to avail of for their purposes. How to safeguard against falling prey to such machinations? What means of conflict resolutions are available for people living in a multicultural and religiously diverse environment to overcome the clash of cultures? The limits of social cohesion. Conflict mediation in pluralist societies is a telling title of a report by social scientists from around the world submitted to the Club of Rome in 1998. The findings of the report assert that actually only 3 types of actions are available for handling normative conflicts in pluralist societies. The first, called the imperative type, relies on the authority of those who are in power. This type of conflict resolution does not rule out suppression of divergent opinions, nor of minority groups or of those deviating from society at large. Actually, the imperative approach does not solve conflicts. It suppresses these by giving a ruling. The second, called the pragmatic type, holds to the possibility of conflict resolution through negotiations between representative allies who sit at the table mandated to arrive at an implementable compromise for which they willingly set aside normative questions to avoid failure. That is why their agreements have a high probability of not working in situations where deep-rooted norms are at stake, as is the case with cultural religious conflicts. These conflicts, the report declares, can only be resolved by the, quote, third and most difficult type of mediation called dialogic mediation, which addresses normative differences head-on and engages in dealing with everyone's otherness without simply seeking the least common denominator, end of quote. Thus, dialogic mediation, which requires the willingness to listen honestly and to invest in time, holds the key for proactively de-escalating, even overcoming the feared clash of cultures. Experience shows that moral or intellectual appeal for tolerance and hospitality do not warrant the peaceful coexistence of people in multicultural settings. While goodwill, hospitality, and admonition for tolerance are laudable, they lack the power to resolve underlying suspicion. But as long as suspicion is not addressed as such, it provokes fear. Hence, cultivation of in-depth understanding of differences is as important as are the appeals for tolerance and kindliness. In-depth understanding of irritating differences, however, is to be gained only when people get in conversation with one another about issues causing friction, anxiety, and fears. Therefore, cultivating dialogue and actively pursuing it is proactive peacekeeping. How come that dialogue gets vested with such a power, even though it appears to be just a mutual exchange of words and, luckily so, not one of bullets? What is dialogue? Dialogue is a distinctive human way of sharing life by language-bound interpersonal encounter face to face. Dialogue is not just being in conversation with one another or casual exchange of information. Likewise, dialogue is not equivalent to a discussion, a debate, or a dispute in which opposing parties try to convince one another with arguments, because dialogue is not concerned with domination or power, nor with winning someone over. Also, dialogue is not a synonym for negotiation, since negotiations attempt to reach a compromise acceptable for all stakeholders. But to preserve partisan interest as the negotiating partners are mandated to is an attitude deadly for dialogue. In terms of function, dialogue comes close to round table talks, which aim to resolve problems by involving every party affected in mutual fellowship for finding ways into a livable future for all. Yet, dialogue does not exhaust itself in problem solving. Dialogue is a mutually shared struggle with contentious issues for the sole purpose of sustaining communal conviviality, notwithstanding differences. It is by authentic interpersonal face-to-face encounter that dialogue comes into its own, namely to establish mutual trust. The goal is neither to level nor to achieve uniformity of thinking or conformity of opinion, nor is dialogue concerned with balancing group interest or proselytizing. Instead, dialogue seeks to gain understanding of and insight into apparently irreconcilable differences, insights not accessible any other way. Dialogue thus requires commitment to a cognitive process in which people of different backgrounds, informed by specific core values, participate as individuals. Only from experiences gained in the course of this process does genuine trust build, trust that can also accommodate tensions as those arise. That is why dialogue, unlike negotiations, can never fail. If and as long as people suspicious of and hostile to one another talk, there is hope for strengthening an all too fragile peace. As Jewish philosopher Martin Buber once noted, quote, "In a genuine dialogue, each of the partners heeds, affirms, and confirms his opponent as an existing other, even when he stands in opposition to the other. Only so can conflict certainly not be eliminated from the world, but be humanely arbitrated and led towards its overcoming." End of quote. To build trust through understanding amid tensions is the power of dialogue. Dialogue is a truly humane way of living with conflicts by understanding why differences exist. On this basis, human life can thrive in all its variety and diversity. That is why fostering dialogue, interreligious dialogue in particular, is of such importance in a world torn apart by suspicion, threats, and warfare. Once people stop talking to one another about contentious matters, alienation creeps in, anxiety and fear aggravate. Matters turn to confrontation and scapegoating easily, and war is not far off. If lurking conflicts are not addressed, they jeopardize the societal cohesiveness of any nation as much as the stability of international world order. Fostering a robust culture of dialogue to stem this tide must therefore become a major concern for everyone living in pluralist societies. In the words of theologian Hans Küng, quote, "No world peace without peace among religions, no peace among religions without dialogue between the religions, and no dialogue between the religions without accurate knowledge of one another." End of quote. Fostering a robust culture of dialogue is indispensable today. Yet, When calling for it, one should be clear that dialogue is not only arduous in acquiring accurate knowledge about worldviews across cultural divides. Dialogue is risky too, because dialogue expects everyone to commit to embarking on and travel down roads unknown till now with companions as yet unfamiliar. In the end, such a journey might require breaking away from and leave behind cherished suppositions as soon as these are realized as untenable any longer. The guidelines religions provide for sustaining life keep changing over time, even though they often are understood to be eternal and holy. But religions are variations of lived relationships towards an ultimate and evolve constantly by adapting to challenges of the times in light of their particular tradition. In dialogue, everyone is called to authentically re-examine long-held convictions in face of new challenges in order to re-own them by rediscovering their plausibility. Putting conventional continuums of speech about the ultimate to the test in dialogue to see if these are still appropriate prevents the traditions from becoming encrusted. Engaging in dialogue does not question the ultimate as such. Dialogue rather questions inadequate ways of communicating about that what really makes sense ultimately. The most challenging task in dialogue is to communicate intelligently to others the heart and core of one's own religion in its specificity. Without knowledge of the non-interchangeable center and heart of a religion, the manifold, distinctive aspects of the worldview and the peculiar directives for life remain unintelligible. But how to communicate about the ineffable across diverse cultures and in different languages, well knowing that to speak of the ultimate implies conscious recognition of the limits of speech? If language actually could capture the ultimate would be penultimate only, over against the all-comprehending mind, which philosophers of the Enlightenment thought was the case. Yet they fail to consider the complexity of life, of human life in particular, which cannot be reduced to the rational only. There is no reason to exempt from dialogue any insight or value. To stifle dialogue out of a perceived sense of threat or fear of potential loss means opting out of communication in face of existing differences. Herein lies the chief evil and pitfall of fundamentalist refusal of dialogue. However ready for dialogue one may be in terms of attitude, no authentic communication can take place if one shields treasured insight from the broad daylight of competing alternatives in fear of blasphemy. While understandable such dismissal may be, it is precisely not a solution. It is a suspension of the all-important questions only, which, if not given the attention they deserve, motivates religious fanatics to force ignorant contemporaries to listen to their version of truth by taking to arms. To avoid this from happening, it is important to stay in dialogue on all matters, especially those of ultimate concern. Dialogue is, of course, not immune from abuse. The success of dialogue critically depends on the way how language is being used in these exchanges. Dialogue succeeds to that degree in which those speaking are able to achieve factual adequacy as well as congruence between what they are actually saying and what they are in fact thinking, implying, or intending. One can very well speak eloquently, all the while aiming to disguise one's actual intention in order to leave the conversation partners in the dark or to render them compliant by subtle manipulation. Speaking, in and of itself, is not all there is. Much more depends on whether this speaking is authentic and sincere. That is why face-to-face encounter is crucial for dialogue. Finally, a practical caution is here in place too. Above all, religions provide guidelines for individuals as well as for communities how best to cope with the manifold challenges of life. It therefore makes sense to begin interreligious dialogue from this point of view. One is well advised not to address the exclusive claims and teachings of religious traditions at the outset, since all such argumentations rest on secondary interpretation. Proven to their beholders as true beyond doubt, they resist rational discourse and, therefore, they cannot be shaken by critical inquiry. To circumvent dogmatic discourses in initial phases of dialogue is not for tactical advantage, nor is it born out of a disdain for the self-reflected tradition of, for instance, Jewish, Christian, or Muslim theology, nor does this approach interfere with the respective claims to ultimate validity. Approaching interreligious dialogue from issues of life actually lived only transposes conventional ways of life sanctioned by cherished tradition onto the plane of general universal human experience, so to build trust before embarking on the demanding task of reflecting the distinctive claims as such. Practically, then, any interreligious dialogue must pay attention to whether the lived answers and the directives given by the various traditions are furthering or impairing life, and if these directives are still plausible and comprehensible, well knowing that even the perception of what life is differs from one religious tradition to the other. Only dialogue is the way to find out. Thank you for your kind attention.